Welcome to another edition of Break Fake Rules. We have flown across the country to Bulwark Media to have a conversation with Sarah Longwell. In a time when democracy's on retreat, what does it take to break fake rules and stand up for it? All right, well, welcome to Break Fake Rules. Some rules are meant to be broken, and there certainly are a lot of fake ones out there, especially in philanthropy, where, these rules that we have in philanthropy can actually make things harder to make society better. And we've been doing that mostly in philanthropy. But today, we have a very special guest, Sarah Longwell. And, Sarah, I am trying to figure out how to refer to you organizationally, because the Longwell empire is a growing empire out there.
Yeah.
There is Bulwark.
Yep.
There's Longwell Partners. You also have the Democracy Innovation Fund, and so on and so on. So how do we begin with you? Where do we want to focus our time and our energy when it comes to what Sarah Longwell's up to these days?
I mean, while I have a lot of different groups, there are PACs, there are C4s, there's political work, there's the journalism work with the Bulwark, there's the C3 work. They all kind of layer into one space, which is that I'm a lifelong Republican who in 2016 became very alarmed by Donald Trump and what he meant for democracy. I spent a lot of time thinking about how do we save the Republican Party from Donald Trump? And of course, now 7 or 8 years into that work, it's clear that threat of Trump not only remains, not just the man, but sort of the toxic force he's unleashed on the party. And I think all of our projects layer into how do we build sort of responsible center-right institutions that are separate from the sort of MAGA forces? How do we defend democracy in the face of an acute threat? How do we educate voters? How do we bring swing voters into the pro-democracy coalition? And more importantly, or most importantly, how do you build sort of a big, broad pro-democracy coalition that spans from Liz Warren to Liz Cheney? And so I obviously spent a lot of my time on sort of the Liz Cheney side of that or the center-right side of that, but it has been very important to have pro-democracy voices on the right in this moment. And so we try to sort of marshal and galvanize those voices through all these different projects.
I mean, this moment right now is an interesting one as we sit here, because I'm more center-left, if not far left. And I have to say that in the time I have had the benefit of spending with you, your voice, your perspective, and the unbelievable amount of knowledge you bring from doing 3 million focus groups a year?
3 million, yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Really has affected me. It's influenced me. But I want to take a big step back and go to the big rule you've broken in the Republican Party, which is to be a good Republican, you need to be in the MAGA world. So in a way, this mold has been designed where this is what it takes to be a Republican. You said, and many important and influential players who you work with every day said, we're not playing along with that rule as it's being established right before us. How did you break it? How did it feel to break out of it? How do we, and what benefit do you think you're bringing to society by breaking it?
Yeah, first of all, breaking it was easy. For me, it was easy because Trump and his whole ethos, everything about it was wrong to me. So the breaking it wasn't that hard. And honestly, for me, I had already been sort of the weirdest of all species before, which was a gay Republican. And so I was kind of used to this idea that, the Democrats don't like you if you're a Republican, Republicans don't like you if you're gay, and you just sort of have to stand in your space and be who you are. And I learned two really important things actually doing my work on marriage equality that I carry with me today in my democracy work. So one is that you do not need to convince everybody. And so for me, I knew early on that part of my role in breaking with sort of the MAGA movement was going to be figuring out how to find that small slice of voters that we could bring into the pro-democracy coalition from the center right. And that's what we did in marriage equality. It was about, You didn't need all the Republicans to pass gay marriage in a state. You just needed enough to make a majority coalition, right? Then the second lesson I learned was really about validators, the importance of conservative and Republican validators. And so I had been part of Log Cabin Republicans, which was the LGBT Republican group. I was part of the founding member of Young Conservatives for the Freedom to Marry. And so this idea that you needed to have voices that identified with the right, but who were advocating on behalf of marriage equality is sort of the way that I immediately thought about my role with Donald Trump sort of being on the scene. It's how I think about democracy, which is I know we need conservative validators who are explaining why this moment is so fraught, explaining why we should reject Trump and sort of all that comes with him. And also, like, that I needed to go find everybody else who thought like me and figure out how to elevate their voices. I mean, the Bulwark was really just pulling a bunch of people together who were conservatives who objected to what was happening and, like, putting it down on paper and saying it out loud.
Yeah.
And so the one thing you said, though, in terms of the rule being a good Republican, I don't think anybody thinks we're good Republicans anymore. We are apostates. We are out of the club.
Right. And that has severe implications for you. I mean, I've heard some of the hosts on some of the podcasts talk about, they reference the fact that they know of other Republicans who do not want to play the MAGA game, but their livelihood depends on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there was a lot of reasons why people stayed on the team. And I think, one of the hardest parts about all of it was just sort of the heartbreak of seeing a bunch of people you knew and had known your entire sort of professional life who were with you in 2016. We were all sort of never Trumpers together. And then sort of one by one, Charlie Sykes calls it the invasion of the body snatchers. We saw our friends get sort of sucked back in and sort of make their accommodations. And I think that I don't understand it, but I can articulate the rationale, and a lot of it had to do with, well, how am I going to feed my family? This is, my tribe. This is what I've done my entire life. And I think in the face of those things, my response has always been build new tribes, build new institutions. And I think what's been lucky for me, though, is that I got to build those institutions and I could find people who believed in them and were willing to fund them. And so I felt like I didn't have to compromise.
As you're talking right now, I'm going to bring this into the philanthropic domain a little bit. There are, and we talk about this on this show all the time, the people that come on who I would say are they're breaking the rules of the philanthropic sector. And there are some simple ones that you may or may not be aware of where you sit. But in this country, you are required to give out a minimum of 5% of your assets annually as a private foundation.
I didn't know that.
Well, what do you think it is? Is it a minimum or a maximum?
Well, I guess if they set that as the minimum, my guess is then that's what people do.
That is what people do.
Yeah.
And I think most people, if they really pay any attention at all, would say, well, that's a maximum because everybody does 5%. So for those of us that go well beyond, we actually try to strive beyond 5 in our hallways. We're weird. We're different. But here's the interesting part. When you talk to people that work in the sector, they work at foundations where that is the accepted rule, but they don't want to do it. They know they could do more. They want to see more. They want to see more from their foundation. They don't speak publicly about it. They don't try to start organizations or do something differently. They just keep doing it. And they're riding along in that rule. I know there are people that are watching and listening right now who are working at foundations where they are completely limited in what they can do. And they keep doing it because they, like you said, they need the income, they need to live this life. But inside, they are a reformer that wants something different, but they're going to keep going down that path. So it's just an interesting parallel I'm drawing here because to hear, you're going, you want to be in it, you want to be a part of whatever your tribe is. And if the tribe starts to move on you, that's a difficult decision. Do I stay with it or not? I've had people say to me all the time, because I'm very public about my views on the sector. And people ask me all the time, like, aren't you worried about being fired? Aren't you worried about upsetting the family? Aren't you worried about putting your staff in jeopardy? And sure, I do worry about those things. but it's all false. It's a false narrative. It's not real. So you are really out there. You're taking on a powerful political establishment, but you're talking about a powerful government players. Who knows where this goes into 2024? So it does really, I think it takes, kudos to you and your team, because I think it takes an enormous amount of courage to take that on.
Well, I appreciate that. Although, it is sort of like the thing about the rules, maybe I just don't notice them. I'm not like a great rule person to begin with.
That's the beauty of the rules.
And so like the idea, I do find it weird when people feel confined by like all the conventions of and the trappings of the sort of tribalism stuff. Because you get into it. You get into it because you're like, I believe this thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like I got into politics because I love politics, and I think it's the collective way in which we make decisions about how we govern ourselves, and I have feelings about how we govern ourselves. And which, so it is sort of the same, right? Like you get into philanthropy because you think,
absolutely,
I want to make a difference. I will say maybe the one big difference though, your philanthropic folks, they are still doing good. They're just doing slightly less good than maybe you want them to. Whereas in my case, these folks who are collecting a paycheck in order to go do active harm, and harm that they know is harmful. Like this is the one of the most frustrating things. Although when you talk about it, like people tell you privately, man, has that been a hallmark of the last few years, is a lot of Republicans being like, I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing, like keep it up, or I wish I could say that, or telling you that they feel exactly the same way, but that they're not at liberty to say it. Of course you're at liberty to say it. Of course you are. This is one of those things where, and I think if you talked to some of the people, if you talked to Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, the level of liberation that they feel from being able to say the thing that they think and speak authentically about what matters to them, I think they are, even though they have to have private security because of all the hate mail and the threats, I think like any of them or any of the people in our world will tell you they are happier and that they don't have to do this thing every day that makes them feel like gross inside.
Right.
So, I think to your point, like people should go push to liberate themselves. What do they want to do more of?
I mean, that's why we're here, Sarah, today. Yeah. That's what we're trying to push. I want to just kind of say a few things about where we are. We are in the mighty Bulwark Studios, aren't we, right now? Because I had an opportunity, and I've had an opportunity to speak with your staff.
They're great, aren't they?
They are great. They are great.
Strong team.
Strong team.
Yeah.
In some ways, your operation is the softer landing for progressive center foundations to support what you're doing.
Yeah, look, we set our North Star as pro-democracy.
Right.
And so I think that, and as I try to explain, this isn't just everything that's happened. It's not a problem for Republicans, right? It's an American problem.
Of course.
And so it's got to be one of these things we all work to solve together. And just like I think donors recognized when it came to the marriage equality movement that the voices on the center right were going to be critical to building their broad coalition, I think the democracy movement or people who care about democracy have recognized that sort of center-right voices, bringing them in as part of the coalition, is also deeply important. Anybody can be a democracy funder, and I think for a lot of things that I've heard from donors or even organizations in the space, people who focus on climate or focus on racial justice, where they'll say, I don't know how to, especially like the climate folks are always asking me, are there Republicans who are good on climate? And what they need is Republicans who are good on democracy, Republicans who can be part of the coalition. Like every single one of the issues to be durable, to make real lasting change, has to include people on the center right. And so how do you get sort of responsible people on the center right? And so how do you build sort of a big, broad pro-democracy coalition? How do you find Republicans that you can work with on a variety of issues so that compromise can get done, so you can do democracy? Well, that means investing in sort of a whole new pipeline on the center right. So I think, for us, one of our major initiatives is the Democracy Innovation Fund, which is about building these sort of center-right pro-democracy institutions so that we can have a talent pipeline, so that we figure out how to fill this void and build into this space. And I think there's a lot of funders on the left who might think, well, that's not for me to do, or that's not my role. And I guess my thing is like, it's one of those, if not you, who, there's this, it's gotta happen. Otherwise, every single other priority that you have will languish with 49%. Like, you just have to build that bigger coalition. You need it.
So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it needs to be examined on from foundations that I think could be far more effective in this space. Well, I have to thank you so much for having us here.
Thanks for coming.
It's been just terrific to have the time with you. But
next time you don't have to do a podcast with me to talk to me. You just call me on the phone.
It's just been great. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today at Break Fake Rules. We will continue to learn more about how to do this and how to benefit society breaking fake rules. See you next time.
Thanks.
Next time on Break Fake Rules, hear from Priscilla Enriquez, CEO of the James B. McClatchy Foundation, as she leads her foundation's spend down to Sunrise, a brighter future in California's Central Valley. We have so much more to share with you, so follow the Stupski Foundation's YouTube channel and join the conversation with me on LinkedIn.